Broadcasting from the Any Hour Services podcast studios, I'm your host, Mike Wilson, and on this episode of In the House, we're going to be talking about common furnace failures and how to avoid them. Let's go. Is that the first time you've heard the button?
Yeah. That's awesome.
That's the response I was looking for.
Usually you're doing your little that was like 1,000% improvement right there.
That's exactly why we got the button, because I looked weird, like just dancing to nothing, because that's the song I hear in my head every time I say, let's go. And now we actually have a button to...
That was the song you were like singing along, like doing your little doot-to-doot too?
That I was hearing in my head, because that's the song, that's the theme song of the show.
Interesting interpretation. What would come out? I'm just saying.
Oh, yeah, like what I would sing instead. Yeah, there's a reason that we never put that on the show. Like it was just a placeholder at the time.
Yeah, I got you.
Anyway.
I'm still waiting for the Alexa.
Well, yesterday we used the phone. Where is my phone? Did I have...
Oh.
I'm naked.
Oh, sorry.
Like, I usually have my phone in my pocket or something. I must have left it upstairs on my desk. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Hey, In the House is a podcast about the major systems in the house: electrical, plumbing, heating, and air conditioning. Each week, I'm joined by a panel of experts. We pick a topic and we discuss it in depth. It's meant to be informative and hopefully bring you some value. I've got Kevin and Richard with me today. They're managers over the HVAC service and install department at Any Hour Services. Guys, how you doing?
Doing well.
Do you guys help out cleaning around the house?
No, a little bit.
A little bit. How about you?
Yes.
But
not as much as other people.
Yeah, I seem when I do it, my wife just isn't happy. She's like, no, you need to do that again.
My wife was out of town for a little bit not too long ago, and so I was doing a lot of the cleaning. And like, I realized that when I go to the store to buy like the cleaning product, I like smell them all, and it's whatever the smell is that hits me at the time. Do you guys have a favorite cleaning product?
No.
The
one you say that, like Pine Sol, always comes to mind.
Ooh, I like Pine Sol. Pine Sol's good.
My wife really likes that Windex the antibacterial, whatever that is.
Oh. Do you know...
Sprays that on everything.
Do you know what cleaning product is the dinosaur's least favorite?
No.
Comet. Like I mentioned... Like I mentioned before, we're going to be talking about common furnace failures, common furnace problems. You guys have to have some dad jokes.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Hey, so I have to revisit my answer about helping. Does making my kids clean, does that count as me helping clean?
It doesn't count as you helping clean, but it counts as you helping to like make sure the cleaning's getting done, because that's one thing that my wife, she'll be like, can you go talk to your... Oh, I banged on the table. She's like, can you go talk to your kids and get them? I need your help right now.
All right, as long as it counts a little bit.
Okay,
Yeah.
Here's another one for you.
Mm-hmm.
What if my wife says, can you vacuum? And I say, hey, Alexa, start the iRobot Roomba. Does that count?
In my mind, it does. If that's how she would have vacuumed.
Work smarter, not harder.
Well, she hasn't complained about it yet.
Yeah, no, that counts.
Oh, that's sweet.
Work smarter, not harder. That's what my dad always taught me.
Should we start it right now?
Yeah.
Let's start.
She's going to think it's like possessed.
Oh, I got a new phone and I don't know what my password is to log in.
Oh, well.
I'll figure it out.
All right. Well, we are going to be talking about common furnace problems that you guys see on a daily basis. And I'm sure we could go over tons and tons of scenarios and different parts that fail and thing. But for the sake of time and the fact that we're going to go in depth on these, let's try and narrow it down to a top, 5 things that you guys see on a daily basis. Not that you have to see all 5 in one day, but if you look at like all the service calls that are run, because we run a lot of service calls, more than probably anybody else in the state as far as like, service companies go. So what are some of the common things that you guys run across out in the field? Common things that fail on a furnace?
I think you ask that question, I have to think to myself, okay, what's the typical call? No heat. And people, they call up, and no heat can mean a lot of different things. You know what I mean? A lot of stuff that contributes to it. It seems like you show up to houses, and a lot of the time you go in there, and a lot of the times it can be something pretty simple, from a switch just being left off, or kids got in there and flipped the switch off on the side of the furnace, to there actually being something that's wrong. Typically, when we get out to a house, we're going to ask customers some questions just to get an idea as to what the actual furnace is doing. You know what I mean? And so you listen for some indicators. You know, Richard, I tell you, hey, my furnace seems to be running, but it starts up and then it kicks off, and then it starts up again, then it kicks off. And it blows out a little bit of heat, but then after a little bit, it just shuts off. What are you thinking?
I'm thinking flame sensor.
Yeah, exactly. Man, I hit that on the head, and you hit
You
that on
did.
the head. That was perfect.
You guys, I can promise you, they did not rehearse this before the show.
No.
They wouldn't even give me feedback on the notes for the show, so I can guarantee you they didn't practice that.
We really figure that you need to earn your earn your money.
We're turning you into a technician, Mike.
I'm getting close. I've been making a lot of furnace videos and coming off the back and making a bunch of air conditioner videos, and you know, it's not as easy as a lot of people think that it is. There's so many different things that tie into something else that could be tied to something else, and you know,
Well, it's like you say though, there is a lot of different things it can be, but you know, one that's super super common, dirty flame sensor, and you know, that's probably one that I've come across a lot of customers that they have heard of a flame sensor, but they don't necessarily know exactly what it is or what it is. You might have heard somebody say somewhere in the past, "Oh yeah, just clean your flame sensor," right?
How often have you heard that? And then you get down there and they show you what they cleaned, and they actually cleaned
busted the igniter. Oh yeah,
it's like, oh boy, no, that was not the flame sensor.
Yeah.
Well, you know, and I think that especially with furnace, even more than air conditioners, there's a lot of safety devices inside, and something will go out and your furnace might stop working, and it's not that the furnace is broken, it's that it might think that there's a problem because there is a part that's not registering. And so like what does a flame sensor do so that people can like understand why the flame sensor being bad, that the furnace would just stop working?
Well, the flame sensor is one of those safety things. You know what I mean? In fact, you've got a couple of different kinds sitting here. Oh, hey. I mean, it's just basically, just to describe it simply, it's a metal bar that's inside that the flame actually burns directly on, right? But the thing of this is sensing from the flame itself a really small amount of electricity, right? Now, if you look in I love you got like toys all over the place here.
Yeah, you put them on shelves, so like we can't reach them and play with them. I think you did it on purpose, keep it out of our hands.
Well, I
can
mean,
reach them.
the table.
You're the one we should
clean.
have reach.
I'm over here playing with them. Look at this.
I pulled that igniter out of a furnace yesterday.
Yeah, they all look old and used. All right.
It's because they came out of our scrap yard.
Oh yeah, love the boneyard.
So
That's one of my favorite places to go.
essentially, you've got your burners, right? And you typically have 2 to
6,
8 of these. If you got a massive furnace, you know, typically you're going to have an ignition source on one side, right? And on the other side, you're going to have a sensor, flame sensor, that's just going to let us know that the flame lit and carried all the way across, and that you don't have one of your burners somewhere just spewing gas without flame. A couple of things that can happen here that's really dangerous, and the reason they have this is if this lights, right? Well, one thing, say nothing lights, right? For some reason, your ignition source doesn't work and nothing lights. This is what tells it to not spew gas and just fill your house with gas. It says, hey, there's no flame, turn off.
Yep.
Right? And so if you, the other thing that it does is sometimes you might have a blockage somewhere and half of this will ignite. And this is where it gets kind of scary, right? So you say you have a couple of burners that actually light up, but your last 2 or 1 or whatever doesn't light. And so now you've got gas building up over here with flame over here. There's a potential that you could have some major issue once that gas builds up to a point to where it catches that and ignites. And I've actually seen some furnaces have some fun,
A little explosion.
little bit of explosions because of that, right?
That's one of my favorite ways of describe when I'm on the radio. I love describing the way a furnace works. I'm like, look, for as much as technology has improved our lives, for the most part, to heat our homes, we still pump gas into a metal cabinet and light it on fire.
Yep, may as well
Had
stand
one of
around
my-
a fire barrel.
Had one of my technicians yesterday, didn't get lit and an explosion and got some hair burned. So
Oh, yeah.
Wait, what?
yeah, had an explosion yesterday on a furnace.
That he was working on?
Yeah.
Did it like roll back on him or
Yep.
something, or is that what happened?
Yep.
Hey.
Good times.
Okay, so flame sensor. So what, a dirty flame sensor, what causes it to get dirty?
You get buildup from the soot on the from flames, like Kevin says. It's inside this
Did
flame.
you want to hold it?
Sure. I'm sure our listeners can see it.
I was going to say something about I'm holding the stuff up. We're on a podcast.
Well, I was actually trying to pay attention, and you were like using
I was
terms
doing
and like
I was doing it
okay.
for your benefit. No one else's.
I did benefit, and there are people that were watching.
So if your furnace is like in a laundry room, we get lint on there a lot and can do that. Older ones can have soot. We've seen them where the air conditioner coil leaks on top of it and just rusts out and corrodes it. So there's different things, and then they just can get dirty, dust flying around, and over the years of use.
And I mean, what's the most common? So them getting dirty and not being able to detect the flame, there being enough of a buildup on the rod that it can't detect, or that the flame can't produce enough electricity for it to register on the circuit board. That's the most common. But are there any common factors of why one would fail, or is it just that they go out?
You've got voltage going to it from the control board. If you get like a bad ground or bad wire or something like that, that can cause it.
Gotcha.
So there's little things like that. If you got stray voltage and weird voltage going to your house, it can cause some issues there.
And it's sensing such a small amount of electricity that it doesn't take much to just make it so it can't. So that amount of electricity can't get through.
Gotcha.
Know.
If it's this, as Kevin's got that, it's got porcelain base around it.
Did you want to hold it again?
Yeah, let me hold it again so I can show Mike, because Mike's learning her, right? If you get cracks on these porcelain right here, it can cause problems if they just, over time, some reason the porcelain cracks, vibration of the furnace or something like that, they can cause some damage to where it's, getting voltage from somewhere else.
Gotcha. Okay.
You can put that back, Kevin. I'm done with it now.
So flame sensor, that's a common one that we have to go out and fix.
Now, just really quick, like I was saying before,
before on the show or before the show?
On the show.
Okay.
This is one of those parts that a lot of people have heard something about, right? And it's actually, I don't know how many times Richard's come across this, but I've seen it quite a few times where you get there and they're like, they finally because they had been trying to clean the flame sensor on their own, right? And or do something with it. They'd heard from someone and they're like, yeah, just whatever with the flame sensor. And they've pulled out the wrong item because you've got a couple of different things in there.
Yep.
And they have busted the igniter or something along those lines. So you actually have got to be really, at least know what it is you're looking at. So
for sure,
for the 3 people that are watching this.
Well, and for those listening that because we're the only 3 that are going to go back and watch it. So there's a lot of videos online, because with it being the most common issue, it is something that if you need to get by and just get the furnace to stay on, a flame sensor is something that you can clean. And I know that there's different camps on no, don't clean them. Yes, clean them. The stuff that I looked at in all of the videos that I make, I usually will tell people refer to your owner's manual. It should know whether you should be doing something or not, because I've made videos showing people how to test the flame sensor, how to troubleshoot if it is the flame sensor, how to clean the flame sensor. And it is something that you can do, but in all of the flame sensor videos, I feel like I'm repeating myself when we make them back to back, because I'm always make sure that you're picking the right one. The igniter is not the flame sensor. It's got a couple wires going to it. This has got one wire going to it, and make sure that you're not mixing those up, because you can bust it off and it won't work.
If your house is not heating, and that seems to be the problem, you see those flames turning on for a couple seconds to turn off. I mean, that's something you can try. I mean, try cleaning it. I mean, use something that's not going to scratch it up. Don't grab some really gritty sandpaper and you'll ruin it.
Maybe a rough cloth of some kind.
Just something to get that carbon buildup or something, and try to get it clean, and then we can test it. And if cleaning will work, then great, we keep it. If not, then we'll replace it.
I've only ever seen, and I know that there's different things that you can use or that people use to get that buildup off. But in the owner's manuals that I looked at, the only 2 things that I saw them reference were a Scotch-Brite pad or or steel wool. And so
$100 bill.
$100 bill. It's a trade secret.
I've heard technicians say that you could do that. And honestly,
the bigger the dollar amount, the better it cleans.
The more you save on your heating bill. So when I was making the video yesterday about how to clean the burners in your furnace, I I took the burners out and I could see the flame sensor, and it had a little bit of stuff on it. I was like, oh, let me grab $1. And I realized I don't walk around with cash anymore. And a credit card will not clean your flame sensor. But
yeah, they're tough to clean digitally.
So, okay, so flame sensor is a common one that goes bad. What's another one that goes out?
Igniters. Since we're on the topic of ignition, igniters are definitely one that goes bad a lot.
So what causes those to go bad?
Definitely wear and tear, or somebody trying to clean a flame sensor.
You may have caused it to go out.
Yeah. They just get hot over and over and over and over again, and wear and tear. They can just eventually wear out.
Well,
and
with
break.
that heat, that expansion and contraction, do you find that those ones, I don't know why they make them this way, but they're like an
M.
Yeah, like an M shape, and there's like gaps in between it, and the metal or the whatever the material is, the carbon there is just super thin and makes it even more brittle. Do you find that those fail more than the others?
Yes.
They're a lot more fragile for sure.
Yeah, the one Kevin had right there, that's a newer design. Those ones have definitely been proven more reliable, and they're not near as fragile.
I went out to the boneyard yesterday and like looked for the kind that has that little M, that weird shape, and I found one. I was like, okay, cool. I'm going to have this and we actually wanted to do a video to show how easy it was to break. And so I took the igniter out, and then there was a screw holding it into a bracket. And so I put my drill on the screw, and the bracket started vibrating, and the thing broke.
Yep.
And I was like, Cam, you got that, right? He's like, no, I wasn't focused on it yet. So anyway, so then we had to dig through some more furnaces to try and find another one. Anyway. So
anybody that has been doing this for not even that long has had one of those bust when you're trying to replace it. Like the new one, like you're trying to put it in, and you're trying to be careful and weave it in there, and you tap it on something on accident, and you're like, dang it.
I wonder why they make those so fragile.
I don't know. Was it Tuesday I was out there? I was out the boneyard doing the same thing. I had a new hire I was showing what it was, and because of I've been doing this for 20 years, I used my hand wrench, not the impact wrench, because I knew if you do that, there's a good chance it's going to break, because I want to show them, hey, this is how easily it can break.
That's a good pro tip right there. I'll have to remember that. So, okay, so they just get brittle over time. Is that one susceptible to surges the way that the flame sensor is?
I would think so.
Okay.
Yeah, because they have to have a certain amount of voltage going to them. If not, they're not going to work properly.
Got it.
Those specifically ones you look there, if you pull out that older one, I don't know if you have the video footage of one, but if you look at them, they're really white, and if you zoom in on it really good, you'll see where they're starting to crack. You'll see like where they're coming apart.
Are you talking the M-shaped ones?
Uh-huh.
I didn't notice that, but we'll start looking for that out.
That was the thing I always liked about those. You could always look in there and see the crack.
Yeah.
It's, super easy to tell when they were actually bad.
Yeah, those ones have been gone for a few years, but yeah, igniters are definitely something that goes bad. They turn on and off a lot. I mean, I had the training once. They said the average furnace turns on like 4 or 5 times an hour. So that's over the heating season over the years. That's a lot of on-off. It's going to break.
That makes sense. What else? What's another part that goes bad? We've got 2. Just a few more.
That's pretty good.
Yeah,
it is good.
That's pretty good. Another one is the inducer motor.
Okay.
Essentially,
what does the inducer motor do?
So the inducer motor is what creates, they call it a draft-induced motor, right? It's what's drawing air through the combustion area, through the heat exchanger, and then up and pushes the exhaust up and out the flue, right? The exhaust pipe. So,
and that's the first thing that comes on when the furnace kicks on, right? Because you have to create that draft. And is it a vacuum switch that is or is it pressure or vacuum?
Pressure switch is what it's called.
Pressure switch. So that's making sure that that's running before it'll even let anything else happen.
Yeah, what it's doing is it's just checking to make sure that your chambers are clear, your exhaust is clear, they're not blocked or anything like that. So it's a safety feature. I mean, that's a newer design. When I say newer design, I want to say like mid-90s they came in.
They didn't have inducer motors before?
No.
They just trusted that it was drafting out.
Yeah, natural draft was all they had before.
Interesting.
So,
okay. So what, is there something common that causes those to go out?
They have bearings in there. Bearings can go bad. We get a lot of birds that climb down the exhaust and get in there, and they just get inside the little cage, and then the thing can't spin. So I have to tear them apart and clean those out or whatever.
It's amazing the stuff that you'll actually find down there. We had one recently where we pulled out like 47 golf balls. I mean,
That sounds like a kid that like was having fun.
Yeah, they couldn't. It was winter, so there's no grasshoppers.
Was this at your house? Was this at your house, Kevin?
No. We actually. I'll tell you one of the weirdest ones. We actually pulled a big old fat raccoon out of one recently that had been dead there for a little bit.
Really?
Yeah, it was nasty.
I wonder if one of my guys sent this picture in yesterday. I'm showing you guys that are here, but it's pretty crazy.
There's some of the older flue pipes. Well, not some of the older ones even. They can be pretty good size. Mm-hmm. Some of the older styles, the caps weren't such that they kept a lot of stuff out. Mm-hmm. And so new codes, new high wind caps, whatever else, they keep most of the birds and stuff out of your metal flues, right? But there's still some of the older style ones around, and you'll get some weird stuff.
And those inducer motors, those exhausts, they're not really being used all summer.
No.
Right?
No.
Because it only comes on when you're trying to like make heat and use the furnace portion. And so it's easy to see how something could get in there and think like, oh, I just found a space to make my little home. Mm-hmm. And yeah, okay, that makes sense. The bearings you mentioned in there, is that where some squeals will come from?
Here, you want to see that?
Yeah. We got. Okay, so I'm looking at a picture that. Is that a squirrel? Is that came off of a job? Like, were we replacing it, or was it a service call? Man, you got to like send me these things so I can post them on social media. That's hilarious.
Oh yeah.
I mean, sad for the squirrel.
So I have to
I don't think you gave me a record.
Visit my answer. About
if you
helping.
did,
Does making my kids clean, does that count as
that
me
sounds like it's a little familiar, but like send me pictures so I can like post them. Oh, my phone. Just text it to me. I'm not gonna run upstairs during the show. Anyway, all right, cool. So
all right, as long as
inducer motors go out.
Hey, here's another one for you.
Now let me ask you this:
what if
when
my wife says, "Can you vacuum?" and I say,
crawl down in there,
"Hey, Alexa,
is
start
the inducer
iRobot
motor
Roomba."
going out?
Does that count?
My iPad gets text, so I see that that came through. So
work smarter, not harder.
She hasn't complained about
blocked,
it yet.
Is it going bad because the motor is overheating because it can't move
Should we start
the
it right now?
air, or is it that something is getting down in there, binding up the fan portion, and the motor's burning out?
Could be both.
Both of them, either one of those. Is that more common? Is that a more common reason for it failing rather than voltage spikes? Or
I don't have any like data to say it's a voltage spike more than wear and tear. But yeah, no, I would say they just don't work as more common than something inside of it.
Got it.
Because like I said, they have bearings in there and stuff like that. Those go bad.
Gotcha. Oh, that's where I was going to start asking earlier. But when the bearings go out, when you're hearing a winding noise or like a high-pitched squeal, is that usually the bearings, or could it be something else that's like...
Normally it's the bearings, but it could be something that the cage in there is hitting something, but most of the time it's a bearing.
Because my furnace... Go ahead, you were going to say something?
Well, I was just going to say that there's a blower wheel inside the housing that's mounted to, and that can slide up and down the shaft a little bit and can actually rub on the housing.
That's cool. So I
was just thinking, I gotta say it.
No, don't say it. If we're gonna have to cut it out, don't say it.
No, it's not.
Okay, good.
In the previous ones, we called it a squirrel cage. Now we see squirrels climb down there and they use it.
But that's not the cage that you're talking about.
He never made it to down there.
It's got a squirrel cage in it. That's what I'm trying to say.
There was a squirrel cage, and it's like I gotta get there. That's funny. What was I gonna say? So on my furnace. Like, since I've been making the furnace videos, I've been starting it up, and whenever my inducer comes on, there'll be a high-pitched whining noise. And so one of the videos that I'm going to make is actually, like, pull the thing off and see if, like, cleaning it would help. But the little shaft that's exposed that you can see the back of turning, like, if I push on it while it's turning and making that squealing noise, sometimes that will help to quiet it. And so I don't know if I'm, like, pushing it, like if it's rubbing up against something, and when I push it, it like kind of pushes the fan part or something against that it's not rubbing on. But that's going to be one of my videos.
Yeah, it's possible. I
don't know what I'm going to find.
In the middle of the blower wheel, there's a hub that the shaft goes through that you've got a little set screw on. And so it can.
Is it just a smaller version of the blower fan? Okay.
Pretty much.
Got it. Well, that one should be a fun video, because since I don't know what
this is going to be
know what I'm getting into. Like,
you ever like tear it apart and you're just wondering, am I going to get this back together?
I'm going to tell you this. When I was making the burner video yesterday, I went out to the boneyard first because I wanted to get some B-roll of how different burner assemblies come apart. Like, you might have a door that's covering it. You might have to take a bracket off. You might have to remove or loosen the gas. What's the line coming from the valve? Is that gas line, or what's that pipe called?
The
the
shutoff valve, the hand shutoff valve?
from the gas valve.
I just call it gas
that has the little
gas manifold.
Or the gas manifold, yeah.
Oh, manifold. Mm-hmm. Man, I should have used that word when I was making the video.
You would have sounded
that makes me sound
way smarter.
Absolutely. Now I'm going to go back and be like, dang it.
Just dub it in.
Austin, you're going to need to do some
Manifold.
editing this week.
Anyway, but what was I saying? Oh, you might have to loosen the manifold. And I'll tell you this: I had never taken the burners apart in my furnace, but I can see them; they're accessible. And I was like, oh, this will be easy. But there were none out in the boneyard that I took apart where there was a screw holding it down, and there wasn't enough room to get even your angled screwdriver or driver thing on it. And so I was looking at it, and one of the steps that I gave was like, okay, take a second and actually look and see if you can tell how the thing is put together. Which screws are you going to unloosen and all this stuff? And I'm like, you're going to have to pay attention when you're putting it back together. And the funny thing is I filmed the intro to the video first, because I was like, the in-shop burners in my furnace are pretty easy to get to. Yours might be more difficult. And then once we get to the part where I'm taking them apart, I have to take the plate off the top. I have to start disconnecting wires off of the flame sensor, the rollout switches. And I'm like, oh man, I should have taken a picture to see how this stuff went back together. And then when I went to, because at the end of the videos, I always say, okay, turn the furnace back on to make sure that you didn't accidentally do something to cause it not to work. So we flip the switch back on, and it doesn't ignite. And I'm like, uh-oh. And I'd forgotten to turn the gas back on. And so I turned the gas back on, and I flipped the switch off. I turned it back on, and it still didn't ignite. And I was like, this wasn't that complicated. And so, but on the gas valve inside the furnace, there's a little switch that has an on and off. And that thing is super temperamental. I don't even remember bumping it, but it flips no effort whatsoever. And so I turned that back on, and it came on.
Didn't you just send us a video out in an email that check for that?
Look, I learned by doing. The reason that I am the one making the videos is, and I try to come across as look, I'm a homeowner just like you guys. I'm learning along with you, and that's why I have you guys to be able to reference. It's just that I'm probably a little more mechanically inclined than the average person, and so I always, at the end, I felt bad that I had said mine are pretty easy to get to, so I made a dub, a voiceover, be like, well, I thought mine were easier to get to, and I promise there are some that are harder than this. Anyway, okay, so I don't know how we got on that, but inducer motor. What's another part that fails? So we've got 3 so far. We got the flame sensor, igniters, inducer fan, or inducer motor. What else? Anything else?
Blower motors.
Okay, blower motors, and that's the big motor that forces the air through the house. So what are things that go wrong on it?
Well, you've got the motor itself can go bad, and the capacitor on there can go bad, but the motor itself, just the windings, the bearings go out. There's electrical windings in there. Is
it more common? Because when we did our air conditioner episodes, one of the most common things that goes out is the capacitor. So on the blower fan, is the capacitor more common that it goes out, or the motor itself goes out?
Probably the capacitor, but the motor is what you notice. Because what we see a lot of times is the capacitor may be weak, but your blower is still turning on. The capacitor is bad; it's out of range, but it's not preventing your blower from turning on yet.
And if your capacitor is out of range, that's going to put more wear and tear and shorten the life of the motor itself. So when the motor, so electricity is going to affect motors. Is there a way to, when you go out, and this is a selfish question for me, for those of you listening, because I'm going to be making a video on this, and so I might as well ask now instead of after I've made the video and look stupid. When you have the motor, when you test it, are you testing on the nameplate? It tells you how many amps it should be drawing, correct, or a range? Is that right?
Yeah.
So if it's out of that range, then you know that the motor is starting to go bad. And are you testing the motor in addition to the capacitor?
Well, yes, you're testing it in addition. I mean, if it's drawing high amps or something like that, I mean, it could be like just your airflow. Like you could have a dirty coil and stuff like that. So there might be some other things. If those all check out, then yeah, then you got a motor issue there.
Gotcha. Okay, so besides is the most common reason that a blower motor goes out is because of all of that extra wear and tear on the motor, whether it be a clogged A coil, a dirty filter, a bad capacitor? Is that the most common thing that goes out on it? I've heard you guys talk about before, like it'll like wobble, like it'll get out of whack that way. What causes that?
You can get dirt on the blower cage. So, and what happens is that dirt can just get unbalanced, and so it's causing it to be spin uneven, and then it just wears those bearings out more.
And I believe mine was under warranty, but like a motor is like a fairly expensive part to fix, right?
Yeah, it's one of the bigger things.
Yeah, I think mine was like $800.
So
that was the part. That wasn't even like the labor to fix it.
The motors, they have.
I should have been making videos back then, but I wasn't.
The motors have little air terminals. As the air go past it, it cools the motor down. Sometimes it just gets dirt on there, and then they get plugged, and so the motor overheats, and then it causes damage to electrical components inside of it and burn them up.
Which you gotta, jump in here and just mention. That's why we have a filter. You know what I mean? To try and keep things from getting to that point. Usually that's a neglected furnace. Yeah. Which, honestly, it's a huge percentage of furnaces that get neglected. Sure. Filters that get neglected.
Absolutely.
So.
And, I think we didn't mention filter as one of the things that fail, but because it's not really a part like we think of, like the parts that fail on the furnace, but the filter, there's a reason that they say it's the most important thing and the easiest thing that you can do yourself, because there's all kinds of negative consequences of either not having a filter, having one that's too dirty, from airflow, dirt getting into it. And with all the videos and research and stuff that I've been doing, and all this stuff that content I've been making, the biggest thing with furnace maintenance, cleaning, like making sure things are clean. Like if you were to like clean your furnace really well once or twice a year during the season, because you mentioned, the backside of that motor gets plugged up. And honestly, I'm realizing now, whenever I ask you guys, how long should something last? And you're like, oh, it depends. It really like
I love the impression.
The condition. Well, that's how you sound whenever I hear it from everybody. How long should a water heater last? Oh, it depends. So anyway, but the condition that the furnace is installed in, or the condition it's operating under, because like some of them are in attics, crawl spaces, laundry rooms. You mentioned that. And my furnace is like 14 years old, but luckily it was installed in a room that's fairly clean. Because like when I pulled my burners off, I was like, I promise no one has like cleaned these things in like the last 14 years since the thing was installed. And I was expecting like, oh, this is going to be really good for the video. And it wasn't that dirty. And I was like, oh. But anyway, luckily there were some yucky ones out in the boneyard. Okay, so blower motor goes out. That's one more, and then we'll wrap this episode. What's another common part that goes out?
One that people probably hear about the most, or one of the big ones, is a circuit board. Circuit boards are the scary one that people always, don't tell me it's a circuit board. You know what I mean?
It sounds expensive.
It is expensive.
It's true.
I mean, it's basically the brain, it's the computer. It's the thing that's making everything else function the way that it's supposed to. So if they start getting haywire, the tricky thing with them is maybe there is something else that's wrong. You know what I mean? But unless that circuit board's good, I can't even test the other stuff. You know what I mean?
That makes sense.
So
yeah, that's one definitely the voltage, a surge and something like that could definitely take out.
Does dirt short them out?
They can cause them to overheat. The same thing, they get voltage and relays in there. They get warm, so if they're dirty, they're going to act as an insulator and it's going to definitely heat up. They do have burn marks on there and stuff like that. Huh?
Another one that can affect it, because you guys have like taught me this, like if you have a humidifier that's leaking into the furnace and water's running down into, onto the circuit board or something like that. So circuit boards going out is a common one. So there's actually been several things that we mentioned with that. The electricity and the voltage fluctuation could impact them in a negative way. Do you guys, or do furnaces come with like any type of built-in surge protection? Because I know that you can add surge protection onto the home to help reduce that, but
No, not really a surge protector.
when the voltage comes to the circuit board, does it transform before, or does the circuit board transform it down into lower voltage?
Typically, it's before.
So it hits a transformer, and then it's lower voltage when it gets to the circuit board?
Well,
So your circuit board has high and low voltage running through it.
Oh.
So it really, you've got a transformer first, which and it transforms it down into smaller voltage. That's your control voltage. That all of the safety stuff and what's going up to your thermostat, all that's running off of the lower stuff. But yeah, you've got your high voltage has to go to it also, because you've got the high voltage items that have to be able to be controlled as well.
Is the inducer motor a high voltage one? Because it's the motor and is besides the inducer motor and the blower motor, is the igniter a high voltage one?
Most of them.
Yeah.
That one you handed right there.
It had a little thing in it, right?
It's a 24 volt.
Gotcha. All right. Well, good. What were you gonna
I
say?
say that's how come if you be an electrician by trade, you can see the wires are very small.
Yeah.
It's because it's 24 volt, not 120.
Anything else? Not going into more parts, but on the things that we talked about before we wrap the show.
I think you already touched on it, but keeping water out of your furnace. There's a few things, it comes from humidifiers sometimes, so it's a good thing to make sure you're watching those and checking your pads and just making sure you don't have leaks and drips. And then also, people don't realize when the summertime, when you're running your AC, oftentimes your copper lines that run into the AC, sometimes the insulation that's there to prevent the condensation, sometimes it's pulled back or ripped off, and you'll have a section. Maybe it's only a couple inches, maybe it's a foot. And sometimes you'll actually look down at the top of the furnace and you can see water marks where it's been dripping on it. Just stuff to keep an eye open for, because that water, if it gets down in and builds up, it can get on the inducer motor and cause issues there. It can, if you do get water down in there onto the circuit board, obviously that's not a good recipe for anything. So,
got it. Well, that's the show. Thanks for listening. We'll be back next Tuesday with a new episode of In the House. If you'd like to know more about Any Hour Services, go to anyhourservices.com. I've been your host, Mike Wilson, and you've been listening to In the House. See ya.